Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The House will come to order. In the absence of clergy, let us pause for a moment of silence. Visitors are invited to join members in the Pledge of Allegiance. A quorum being present, the clerk will read the Journal of Tuesday, June 14th.
Yes, Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Morelli.
I move to dispense with the further reading of the Journal of Tuesday, June 14th, and that the same stand approved.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, if I could have members' attention so we can announce our schedule for the day. It will be a busy schedule, colleagues, and I do want to thank you for your cooperation yesterday in doing a great body of work that we needed to do. Today we'll begin our work with a privileged resolution honoring the lives of those lost in the tragedy in Orlando. And I would just ask for everyone's patience. This is an important resolution we want to take up. We'll take that up first order of business. Once that's concluded, members have on their desks a main calendar and a debate list. After any introductions and housekeeping following the adoption of that resolution, we will work today on consent, picking up where we left off yesterday with Rules Report 280. We will work from the main calendar and the debate list and additional calendars that will no doubt be produced by the Rules Committee. Members should be aware that the following committees will be called off the floor at some point during our proceedings today: alcoholism, children and families, codes, economic development, election law, housing, local governments, ways and means, and rules. Members on both sides should note that there will be the need potentially for conferences, and we'll make those announcements throughout the day as that's appropriate. So with that as a general outline, Mr. Speaker, if we could go to that privileged resolution and take it up at this time.
Thank you. Clerk will read.
Resolution number 1563. Mr. Hasty, legislative resolution mourning the loss of life in the wake of the devastating tragedy in Orlando, Florida, and applauding all of those who acted immediately and heroically in the face of danger.
On the resolution, Ms. Glick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for letting us take a few moments out of the proceedings to acknowledge the senseless violence that took the lives of 49 members of the LGBT community. It was a very popular night spot, and it was Latin evening, and so 23 of the 49 of those killed were Puerto Rican Americans. Nightclubs and gay clubs have been a safe space for the LGBT community for generations. It is where people who were unable to be out found a place where they could be themselves with other people. But this isn't the first attack on a gay club. There is unfortunately a sad history. In 1973, in New Orleans, there was an arson that resulted in the death of 32 people. In 1997, there was a nail bomb thrown into a lesbian bar where 5 individuals were wounded. This was done by the same person who had attacked the Atlantic Olympics. The first time I remember an attack on a gay bar was in 1980, the Ramrod Bar in the West Village. There was a shooting that killed 2 people and injured 6. It is a painful truth that hatred exists and evil exists in the world. Gay people have been targeted individually, really probably for centuries, but certainly in my memory. I was attacked on the street in Greenwich Village in the mid-'70s. I at least knew enough to turn my head. I wasn't smart enough to duck. Um, but that violence permeates the lives of gay people. I said to somebody that I knew who was a good guy, and he said, "Well, everybody, you're free here in the West Village." And I said, "Do you ever think twice about holding your wife's hand? Does it ever cross your mind that that could result in you being attacked?" And he said, "No." I said, "Every gay person has to think twice whether a brief display of public affection will result in a violent attack." There are really countless LGBT people who have been murdered. Transgender women in particular are most vulnerable. We all remember Matthew Shepard, and these things do not change the world. We still hear hatred, and hatred, the worst of it is that hatred is perpetrated by people from pulpits across this country. So my heart goes out to the families of those murdered and those who survived who feel guilty about surviving. What we say here today hopefully will at least change the rhetoric that we here in New York State employ in our discussions. But understand, every single one of you have gay constituents, and every single one of them feel the same way I do. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to say a few words today. We have come a long way, but the very act of having marriage equality legal in the states has not made us safe. Many states you could still lose your job. Many states you could still lose your home. And obviously, in many places, you can still lose your life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Bronson on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to my colleague, thank you for sharing those pieces of history so that all of us in the room understand that even though today we are mourning the dead and thinking of those who are injured from Orlando, that this is not a unique situation. The horror of this act on Sunday morning when I was celebrating with my colleagues from the college I graduated from was beyond comprehension. There was concern, there was sadness, heartbreak, and tears. Those were the reactions of not only myself, but my colleagues. An assault weapon in his hand and hate in his heart. This man took the lives of far too many and injured many more. And their medical injuries, their bodily injuries, may heal. The psychological injury of this attack may take much longer and may never heal. This gunman's act was one of terror and one of hate. The hate begins at an early age for many people. The hate continues as we use language which is hurtful and degrading. We must be cautious in our society when we are talking about others with a lack of respect and a lack of dignity. We must remember that that approach ultimately reveals the most ugliest aspect of our human being. A hate crime with a gun, with violence targeted at people simply for being who they are, is an act that brings psychological terror aimed at killing our spirit and our pride. Far too often, there are those in our society who see the world through a prism of homophobia, transphobia, and queerphobia. Law enforcement is still investigating this act, and we may never fully know what the motivations were of this person who took these beautiful people from us and harmed so many. And as my colleague pointed out, he took their lives and he harmed them in a gay nightclub. Many of you in this room won't understand what that means to us. Gay nightclubs were a place to go where you didn't typically fear being attacked. You were around people who respected who you were. You were allowed to be who you were. It was, and it is, our sanctuary. We must take steps for healing now. And I thank each and every one of you who signed on to this resolution for being a part of that healing and sharing with us, supporting our brothers and sisters who were injured and killed in Orlando. Together, we will share and we will care and we will carry some of the burden that they are facing. I thank you for all of that. I know we all believe in racial, ethnic, and religious equality for all. And most of us in this room believe in sexual orientation equality and gender equality, including our trans and gender expansive friends. No matter whom you are, what you look like, who you love, or where you come from, we all deserve respect, dignity, and an opportunity. We all deserve the right to live without fear in peace, have a chance to succeed, and realize our full potential. We in this country hold certain truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal with unalienable rights such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The gunman in the early hours of Sunday, June 12th, attempted to challenge these unalienable rights. We will not allow him to succeed. We will win with pride. We will win by celebrating our diversity. And we will win with love. I thank all of my colleagues for remembering and for allowing us to begin the healing process. Thank you.
Mr. Tatone on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to first, acknowledge that the gay community, for many of you here, we can be a pretty confusing lot. I get that. We're diverse, we're complicated. If I wanted to make a sports analogy, it would be like over at the top of the ninth and bases are loaded, and I think I just fumbled that. Certainly, Deborah knows more about sports than myself, Harry, and Danny combined. We get to say things to each other that you don't. Harry can call me a queen, and that's fine. You can't. Danny, Deborah, we can call each other fags. You can't. And I know that seems unfair, but it's not, except that it's complicated. The community is complicated. When I first, heard about these shootings in Orlando, of course, like the rest of the nation, I was very rattled, shaken, upset, saddened, and then I became very angry because many of us in the gay community started to think how tragic that this, for many of those who are the victims, whether they were murdered, injured, or witnesses, for many of them, this is their coming out to their families. Imagine that. And I was heartened to learn that actually this wasn't really truly the case. Most of these young guys who were out to celebrate not their gayness, but their heritage, their Latino heritage, to dance a little salsa music, Many of them are already out to their families, and that was fine by them, and that's great. But my heart does break for the couple who had been married for several years and their families did not know. This was their wedding, dying at the hands of a deeply disturbed man who had an AK-15. So yeah, the gay community has come a very, very long way, and I'm grateful for that. But we still have a long way to go, and I just quickly want to talk about, the problem that we do have in our country. When protecting guns becomes more important than protecting a gay man, a lesbian woman, or a transgender person who just wants to go to the bathroom, for God's sakes, that's a problem. It's a very, very real problem. When the protection of a gun becomes more important than the life of a first grader, that's a problem in this country. The gun ownership, it seems, for many, has become more sacred than the value, the preciousness of life. Life has become collateral damage to an assault, the right to own an assault weapon. I'm sure after Orlando, there will be many states, many politicians, people like us who are going to move to, react and create laws. Statistically, and this is a problem, most of the laws that we'll see be written around this country will be to lessen restrictions on the ownership of assault weapons. We'll lower the age from 21 to 18. That's a problem. I'm starting to become very uncomfortable bowing my head in prayer for victims and their families. When I start to think that maybe I, as a gay man, somebody who's elected to office, perhaps I haven't done enough, perhaps I haven't said enough, and so perhaps maybe today, rather than bow my head in prayer, I should actually be bowing my head in shame. If I'm going to pray, I should be praying for the next round of victims, which is sure to come. The man who did this took the 49 lives of my gay brothers and sisters. According to the radicalized doctrine of the National Rifle Association, was a law-abiding citizen up until the moment that he took the first life. Granted, he was profoundly conflicted. He was jacked up on steroids. He was a hateful misogynist with a history of abuse to women. But nonetheless, by all counts, he was a law-abiding citizen who was allowed to be able to purchase an AK-15. Well, ka-ching, 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 bang, bang, you're dead, congratulations. The gay community, I talked about it very briefly. We have come a long way, and we've come a long way in a very short period of time. And, you've heard about the gay agenda, right? The gay agenda that you've heard about. Well, congratulations to the NRA, because you're now on our to-do list. You've made it. And let me tell you something. when gay people set their mind to do something, we get our stuff did. And I can't help but think of some of the text messages that we're reading about. And, I want the NRA to know that I am coming after you because I will forever be haunted by Eddie Justice, who texted his mother. His last words to his mom was, "Mommy, I love you." 2 minutes later, he texted her, "I'm going to die." So in closing, Mr. Speaker, thank you for bringing this resolution to the floor. I hope as all of us speak that we can remember the Eddie Justices, the Mina Justices, the victims whose lives were cut short so senselessly and so violently, and that we pray that our nation will actually recognize for once that we do have a problem and we address it seriously.
Mr. Crespo on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this resolution and to join all of my colleagues who have spoken and those that will speak in regards to this horrific tragedy that affected the LGBTQ community and the Latino community alike, that affected Americans. There should be no one who feels disconnected from this tragedy. In so many ways, in so many levels, the issues that have been raised already are not new conversations on this floor. And they shouldn't be in any legislature, in any dining table, or in any house of worship around the country. We are a country that prides itself on our democracy and our traditions and all of the things that make us who we are. As immigrants, sons of immigrants, we all have a story to tell. Orlando, in particular, has been in the news lately before this tragedy because of the role that the growing Latino community in Central Florida could have on the elections. The fact that Puerto Rico is facing the challenges that it has with the debt crisis, the healthcare crisis, the largest migration out of the island in its entire history because of poverty and political issues that are affecting the opportunity of Puerto Rico to flourish, forcing many Puerto Ricans out of the island and into places like Central Florida and Orlando. The Latino community there, which make up the majority of the victims of this tragedy, share in their own story of fear, shame, I don't know what the word is, for not feeling welcome. We talk about the issues of immigrants on this floor. We talk about people who already carry that. It's a lot like the shame and fear and isolation that the gay community has been put through for far too long. Some of us care about our faith and take certain positions that are not easy choices, but there is no religion and no faith that on its foundation preaches love. And in any situation where someone carries out a murder like this or commits an act like this, or whether it's with a gun or with their words, that is not faith. That is not love. That is hate. That is internal issues. And there are reports about what this own individual has been dealing with in his own life. And the fact that he could not come to terms with that, and that the people around him said nothing to stop him, did nothing to stop him, should send a chilling message to all of us about how we communicate our differences, so that we don't send a message into the world or into our state that it is okay to vilify someone we disagree with. That should never be okay. This situation, I think, forces us to think and to analyze our own positions and our message and the things that we do and the things that we say on so many levels. The Latino community, we're struggling for opportunities. We're struggling for acceptance. to show that we're bringing something to the table. And the fact that names like Sotomayor, Martinez, Velázquez, Ríos, Guerrero, Torres, Rosado, Pérez, Fernández, Flores, Barrios, Ayala, names no different than Crespo, Rodriguez, Sepúlveda, Pichardo, Linares, Rivera, Dávila, no different. I think that as we think about and mourn the lives that have been lost, we should all take a moment to analyze how we communicate whatever our opinions are, but make it very clear that no one deserves to be a victim in this tragedy, that no one deserves to be targeted or vilified or hurt or attacked or shot at, or no life should be taken, much less for who we are, where we come from, what we believe in, and the fact that we should encourage everyone and anyone. If we are of faith, I encourage you to find your faith. If you are gay, lesbian, transgender, I encourage you to be honest with yourself and find yourself. And all of us who maybe have our opinions should respect that person's choice. I will say that I've made choices that I think about and weigh heavy on me every day. But if there's one thing that I will not accept, whether it's in my congregation, in my community, in my work, and none of us should accept on this floor, are messages that encourage someone to point the finger, attack, vilify, or hurt, whether it's emotionally or physically. And so we mourn the lives that have been lost. We pray that this doesn't happen again. And whether it's the issue of hate or whether it's the very real issue of gun ownership and abuse and access that has to be addressed in this country, let this tragedy bring us together. Let this tragedy remind us that we have to love one another. And let this tragedy remind us that as legislators, we have a particular responsibility to use this microphone and this chair to send the message of love, unity, tolerance, and understanding, and change the laws that allow someone as sick as this individual to have so many weapons at his disposal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Dindek on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a very emotional time. First, when you hear about this tragedy, for me, I immediately thought of the attacks of September 11th and my response there and my feelings there of hopelessness and not being able to do anything. And then you start to watch these news reports over and over and hearing all the different accounts and the personal accounts of all these various people. I don't know if many people here will realize how many more people were traumatically affected by what has happened in Orlando. Obviously, the victims, their families, their mothers, their fathers, their brothers, their sisters, their friends. And then those that have been injured that are going to go through probably weeks, months, years of not only physical pain but psychological pain. And then all of the responders that were there, the police officers, the fire personnel, the paramedics, the ambulance drivers, the medical examiner people, the doctors, the nurses, all of that pain and suffering that they had to see and witness and be a part of will be part of their lives and their families' lives, probably for decades, if not for their entire lives. I am so distraught about this another senseless act of violence, and I pray that this body and this country will keep all of them in mind as we go forward and see how we can prevent situations like this from ever happening again. As a father who has a daughter who's a member of the LGBT community, it's also very scared when she goes out into clubs now. Am I going to worry about someone shooting her? I just, so many issues and feelings as a father who's already lost a child and lost my only brother in other circumstances. No parent should ever have to lose a child for any reason. And this senseless violence has to stop. And we as a country and as a nation have to really start to have an adult conversation about gun control. And there are going to be people that are going to say, it wasn't the gun that killed him, it was the person that killed him. Well, let me tell you, if he didn't have an AR-15 that held 60 shots, he wouldn't have been able to kill so many people. It's a horrible tragedy the way you look at it, and we have to get these weapons out of our general public and civilian access to them. I don't think that's, we have to do something. I'm just so upset emotionally since this has happened on so many different levels, and the magnitude of which this event will affect the entire country and probably tens of thousands of people every day for quite some time. Something has to be done. I don't think any one of us as elected officials or as people want to continually go to vigils and just say, oh, another tragedy has happened. Oh, that's too bad. Something has to be done. And I hope we can start to have an adult conversation about assault weapons in the general public. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Arroyo on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And God bless you. You brought this resolution to the floor. It's very important. And I have to tell you something. I don't call gays and lesbians with those names. I call them people that prefer their own sex. It's a preference that they have a privilege to have. And we are all sons of God, no matter what. And that's what is painful here. What is painful here is that another individual that we assume that is a son of God have in his mind that he has to eliminate people because they have a different preference that of the one that he has. He's dead. God will take care of him. But today, we have to think about what happened. And Mr. Speaker, I want to make a suggestion to you. I think that a copy of this paper that is now part of the government of the state of New York should be sent a copy to each one of the families that are affected in Florida. They should receive a copy because they should know that they are not alone, that there are people all over suffering for them and pray for them and embracing him from the distance, because what happened is not a joke. It's something very serious, and we have to take it seriously. I hope you can use your staff or whatever and send to those families a copy of this paper that is very important to all of us. And I thank you again for your initiative. God bless you, and God bless all the people here, because we are human beings, and we know that these individuals, these families are suffering something that have no repair. Thank you very much.
Mr. Sepulveda on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I'd like to offer my condolences to the families who have either lost or had another family member injured as a result of the hateful acts of this individual. It's quite a tragedy, and the LGBT community suffering, and also the Puerto Rican community, because many of the individuals that were injured or killed are members of the Puerto Rican community that live in Orlando. In 1994, I lost my oldest brother to AIDS, and when I was a young boy, I remember that on more than 3 occasions, he was a victim of hateful attacks for no other reason than because he was a gay man. I also have a younger brother who is a member of the LGBT community, who's alive and well. But I can tell you that not a day goes by that myself and members of my family don't worry about one day getting a phone call that he has been a victim of a hate crime. When we learned of the shooting in Orlando, my brother lives in Florida, I can tell you that I took my cell phone and I was shaking, because I know that my brother has been to this establishment in the past. And we were so concerned and worried that perhaps he may have been in there that evening and he was a victim. And I'm thankful to God that, in fact, he was not there that evening. But he could have been. This individual took the lives of so many people at such a young and tender age. And I hope that we can take this opportunity together as a nation to help eradicate hate and learn to respect everyone, regardless of the person who you love or the life that you lead. I look at these children up in the gallery, and I hope that they're hearing the wonderful message, the articulate messages that were said here today by my colleagues, especially Deborah Glick, Senator Crespo, and others, and pay close attention. Pay close attention to the words, because you are the future. And in your hands will be the possibility of making sure that we are a nation where we respect each other regardless of our sexual orientation, our religious preferences, who we love and where we live and where we come from. And I hope that you all learn at a young age